celebrations of the Easter weekend. Wake up, everybody. It's time to give you a weekly dose of the week's top news makers, reviewing them here on Media Monitor with myself, Alicia Jali. Good morning and welcome. We're very pleased to have you with us this morning. I know you're just dying to see the top news right now, so without further ado, here they are. President Jacob Zuma is on a state visit to the oil rich Saudi Arabia. The visit will focus on trade and investment between the two countries. The Nigerian government is sending parents from the northeastern part of the country to neighboring Cameroon to verify whether the would-be suicide bombers are indeed from a group of abducted schoolgirls. Sports news: Bafana failed to secure a win against Cameroon and squandered their chances of qualifying for the Africa Cup of Nations, ending that game in a 2-2 draw. All right, let's have a quick browse through the Sunday newspaper headlines. That's the Sunday Times, and it's leading with two prominent headlines. The first one is about an alleged fall guy in the Nkandla saga, revealing new details on how state funds were used in the project. Another is an alleged meeting organized by President Zuma with the president of Equatorial Guinea to boost his son Duduzane's business interests. City Press there leads with a story about SAA chairperson Dudumieni's attempts to engage a dubious company to save the troubled airliner. Another story is about a spat between Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa and billionaire Anton Rappert. The Sunday Independent leads with a story about the imminent arrest of a suspect in the murder case of Bafana and Orlando Pirates goalkeeper Senzo Meyiwa. And staying with that newspaper, there's another headline about the looming cabinet reshuffle, which is set for next week. That's the week in August then. The headline is about police finding the body of a missing Kills River woman. And of course, the Sunday Tribune leading with a story about a Malaysian flight MH370 debris that was found in a case by a KZN teenager. Well, joining me for today's review is our very own talented SABC reporter who have been up and down this week covering various stories in order to keep you abreast of all things news. Let's welcome Mr. Tumaelo Mohlaoli as well as Mahlaku Komane this morning. A very good morning. Very, very happy to have both of you, and happy Easter Sunday.
Happy Easter Sunday.
Happy
Thanks,
Easter Sunday.
All right. Well, our pick of the day from our today's newspaper headlines is, of course, let's start with the front page of the Sunday Independent, and it says Meyiwa probe, there's a breakthrough. Now, after a construction of the crime scene at Kelly Khumalo's house, police are set to arrest one of the persons or the people who were at the house at the time of Senzo's death. I mean, guys, from day one, everybody's been asking the question, why weren't those people interrogated that were in the house? Why were they not actually put to book in order to try and say what really happened that night? What do you make of this latest story, Tumaelo?
Well, it is a very important question that you raised there. And I think what the police have been consistent in saying is the fact that they wanted to really look at the statements carefully and try and interrogate those that they interviewed who were at the scene at the time. Because you sort of got a sense, without the police coming out and saying on record that there seems to be a lot of contradictions or something doesn't add up with the stories. They've been very careful in how they've been handling the matter, because it seemed that something was not right with how the story was told after the tragic passing of Meyiwa. So this is where I think the investigation is, and police have been very meticulous in how they've handled it because of the high profile nature of the case, and how people have been outraged that after all this time still the investigation seems to be dragging along. One would have assumed that with people inside the same house at the same time when this crime happened, and how the story seems to be changed, somebody should have seen or known something. But now it seems like the cat is now among the pigeons, and we're about to get the real end of what actually happened in the tragic night. A tragic day that Meyiwa passed.
But I mean, Mahlaku, a year later, and they had to have the Hawks come and reconstruct the scene of the crime. I mean, does it really mean for any case to have a breakthrough? That's the kind of step that we need to go through.
I think personally, we as a country, we need to look at how our investigators, are able to do their jobs. Remember, I did a story at the opening of Deep Sloot Police Station, and the minister, Mr. Nathi Nhleko, did say that they are looking at training their investigating officers. It's one of the things that are very important, because these are the guys that are there. They're the first people to arrive at a scene. What they do, or the type of information they collect and how they collect it, is going to make or break the case. We saw with the Oscar story, it was really difficult for the advocate there to try and prove what happened, because there was a problem with how evidence was collected and so forth. So I think it goes back to the training of our men in blue.
All right, look, let's move on now to page 2, which was our main pick for the day, still on the Sunday Independent. And I suppose it's good news. I mean, we need to commend the Road Traffic Management Department. A dramatic fall in Easter road deaths reads the headline. While it has been reported that a 62% drop in road fatalities has been achieved this year, no one died in KwaZulu-Natal. So far, only 45 people have been killed since Friday. Your comments. Let's start with you, Mahlaku.
I think it's wonderful. It's really wonderful to know that the money that government has been spending on educating our people, don't drink and drive. When you're tired, literally stop. Rather start your journey late than just arrive in a box wherever you're going. I mean, to see that only 45 people have passed away these Easter holidays compared to the 120 last year. That's a big drop. And I think it just goes to show that the efforts of government are finally paying through, and people are actually understanding that it's not really about the people that are trying to educate you, but it's about you and me, it's your own safety. You have a responsibility. I have a responsibility as well, because when you drive, there's a saying that when you drive for the person in front of you, behind you, and besides you.
Absolutely.
So you tend to realize that it's you have literally 3-4 cars with an average of 5 people. 20 people can die because of your stupid mistakes. So probably I think people are taking that into heart, and they're saying, okay, how can I best ensure that I actually come back home after the Easters?
And I do think that the zero tolerance approach, and also the public awareness campaigns, government has really gone all out to try and make people aware about behavioral changes. Take a rest every now and then, if you're going on a long journey.
But I mean, Tumaelo, we've had these campaigns every single year. What do you think was different this year in the manner of approach?
Well, I think the message is finally starting to settle in. I think it's just a case of do it until you get a breakthrough, because there's really so much that government can do. Look, in terms of visibility, they've really upped the game. You see at every almost off-ramp, on-ramp, major intersection. The zero tolerance campaign also includes things like roadblocks, which also dealt with cars that weren't roadworthy and really impounding and taking them off the roads. So I think motorists are starting to think, well, it's not really worth my while to transgress. Let me just do what I have to do, and let me get through. But that also has an effect, because you get home, you get there alive.
Yeah, I think also the idea of the inconvenience of being prosecuted because you could not wait to reach your destination to indulge. And I think we're also seeing law enforcement is very important in this, as he had said. And I think also the NPA is also playing a very big role. You are going to get arrested. You will go to court. Now imagine spending 5,000-6,000 rand trying to get bail. I'd rather not drink.
Yeah. And also, I mean, once you are prosecuted and you've got a case, or you've got a record, that's on your record for the rest of your life, and people are really starting to think, is it really worth my while? Maybe not.
Look, the SABC joining in the fight, to try and scourge the crime that is associated with road users, and we saw those people with the story about the fake documents, Stephanie. So what do you think about that?
Well, I like I said, I think honestly, SABC is really trying very hard to get their name out there, to be literally a police service to the people. And these are just some of the things that inspire confidence in people, to actually see people working and the results of that work, because most of the time we only have bad things to say about the cops.
Yeah, it is true. And also I think when you start to clean out things like corruption and fraudulent issuing of licenses at the testing station level. For years you had numerous people who were driving who had no clue what they're doing, because all it took was maybe a couple of thousand underneath an envelope. Now that's been addressed and it's been an attempt to really root it out, you're starting to see motorists who can drive and who know the rules of the road out on the road. And that is also starting to have a positive knock-on effect.
Also, I think it's quite...
quickly.
I think it's quite encouraging. I met a chap once and he said to me that his grandmother had to give him his last 500 rand to go and bribe. I think it's very encouraging. You can't get a job without a license these days.
Yeah.
It's very encouraging to know that something is being done. It's not just the thing that we talk about in corridors and nothing happens.
Well, I know a lot of people were actually nabbed in Mpumalanga yesterday, actually with having fraudulent documents. So big ups to the traffic department there. We're going to take a quick ad break, and when we return, we're going to unpack the importance of the Gallows Project in healing wounds of the past. Do stay with us.
The ANC is not for sale. The ANC is not for sale. And what we will also say is that the ANC refuses to be captured. We will not be captured. Those who might want to capture the ANC and make it their own and influence it to advance personal or corporate interests, you have come to the wrong address. Try next door. We will not be captured.
As stories are broken around the world, SABC makes sure you do not miss out. As the stories unfold throughout the day, News at 8 updates all newsworthy stories worldwide. Globally, we are there. Locally, we leave no story untold. Make a date with News at 8 every Saturday and Sunday on SABC News, Africa's news leader.
This is Media Monitor, the Easter Sunday edition. Welcome back. Remember to give us your views on our Twitter page at SA Media Monitor. Now, the Department of Justice Services launched the much-hailed Gallows Exhumation Project this week, which, with effect from next week, the bodies of political activists that were executed at the Kgosi Mampuru prison and buried in unmarked graves will now be exhumed and handed over to their families. Let's take a quick look at this insert.
This rope with this steel ring will break the person's neck from the back. So, and then the person will fall down there and he will die.
Just walking those 52 steps that the prisoner had to walk, the condemned prisoner had to walk on his way to his execution is a very emotional and traumatizing experience. If you look at the number of people who were executed, that long list of names, it just breaks you.
Look, 130 political prisoners were hanged between 1960 and 1990. What do we know of these prisoners? Do we know anything, Tumaelo?
Well, of course, we know about the great injustice that was meted out to them and the grieving of their families, having a loved one who is involved in a struggle for liberation and then having them disappear effectively because the family never gets any closure. I mean, these were activists really at the front line, and this just shows just how brutal the apartheid regime was in terms of its security apparatus. Even people who were linked with the struggle in any way, if your name came up during an interrogation somewhere, then you were taken. So these prisoners were political prisoners who were taken in, and many of them might not necessarily have been really at the cold front of the struggle. They might have been assisting here and there, and they got caught up, unfortunately. They played their part, and now they're going to be exhumed, and their families will finally get an opportunity to give them the farewell and get some closure that they deserve.
Look, Mahlaku, let's talk about the significance of this at a time where we're seeing political prisoners actually getting parole. Do you think these two actually play a role in each other? How does it, fuse into the other? Are we fair in the justice system?
Well, personally, I don't really understand why it took 20 years for people to be released, the living people. We can't do much about, unfortunately, the people that were hanged. That's very sad. But to sit 20 years and watch people enjoy the fruits of democracy and wonder when is it going to filter to you, one tends to wonder if we're not going to be releasing very angry people, into society. We're not saying that let them not be released, but that's just one of the things that we need to think about. Are these people not angry to sit 20 years in a prison cell in a country that is free? It's really worrying, but it's also encouraging that finally, people will also come out and be able to partake in and enjoy the fruits of a free South Africa that you labored so hard for, you've made such sacrifices for.
But you mean, when you say that, we might risk bringing out angry people, what, in terms of reconciliation, is this not going to take the country forward then, Tumaelo?
Well, I think the idea is certainly there that this is another step in piecing together the puzzle and the story of reconciliation, South Africa turning over a new leaf. As Mahlaku has just highlighted, it's taken this long. And one wonders, what kind of support as well on this point that you're raising will these people be afforded when they have to come back into society? A lot has changed. And we do know that, one of the biggest challenges facing the correctional services rehabilitation program is when inmates come out, they don't have the support. There's a lot of stigma usually attached with people who've been incarcerated. This is a different example because this is a political kind of situation. However, they will need a lot of support. A lot has changed, and they have to be given the opportunity to make a meaningful contribution back into society. But this is the missing link for me. How will this happen? What kind of support structure and network will these inmates be given to give them a second opportunity, a second shot at life, which they were, very robbed of. They were robbed of unjustly.
I think also we need to also look at the economic platform that these people are coming out into. It's very hard to get a job now. I think it goes back to that. How are we going to transition these people into society so that we can also try and bring them up to speed with life? I mean, I'm sure these people have families, their fathers, their uncles, their sons, and how African society is structured. We all provide for each other. Suddenly you're out of jail, you've been there for 20 years. What's your skill set? What is it that you can do? Now I'm coming out of jail, I feel I fought for this country, and then suddenly I must come and be a cleaner or sit at home or, it's.
All right, well, let's look at another aspect because among other things, the project seeks to assist the victims' families to find closure. However, critics say it's long overdue, as Stefina pointed out, but let's take a quick look at this clip.
We are saying this is long overdue. You need to understand that these people were hanged in the early 60s, 62, 63, 64, and now we have been in this democratic dispensation for more than 21 years, and then we are only doing it now. But we must appreciate the effort.
The issue of closure, we did touch on it earlier on, but Tumaelo, do you really think this is going to bring closure or rather open up old wounds for some people that felt that maybe their hanged family member was actually, wrongly hanged? Or
because closure is one thing, but retribution as well is something that is an important part of the healing process. So, when you revisit the injustice that has been visited on these families, many questions will arise. Okay, now the body's finally been resumed. It's taken this long. What about what actually happened and how the family suffered? How do you begin to measure then what kind of restitution is due to them if families feel, well, we've always been saying there was an injustice. Now it's time for us to be compensated in some way. How does that work? Because that's also a very important part of the healing process, as we saw in the TRC.
Speaking of compensation, the department said 47 remains have been exhumed so far, while 83 remain in unmarked graves. So it's still going to take quite some time for the department. It's got its work cut out for them, Steph.
Look, it is an extensive project, this type of project. You have to make sure you know how we are African. You can't give people the wrong bones. We can't be burying the wrong people and trying to rebury them. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of time. That's a lot of effort.
And also some relatives have passed on as well. I mean, it's going to be a huge task to try and get the DNA samples out there.
It is, this project, as much as we welcome it, you can only just imagine the type of work that will go into this, because it's really, really complicated. Like you said, some families, there's nobody left. Who do we give the body to? Some families have died without their closure and stuff. So I'm really waiting to see how it pans out and how that goes. But we must actually commend the department for trying to actually bring people back their people. It's so important in our society and in our culture to actually bury your dead. It gives some sort of closure, but I think also it goes back to the issue with now that you guys have told me that I've been wronged, how are we going to fix my wrong? Because that's human nature as well. We need to take that into consideration. So quite keen to see how that one plays itself out.
I think it's a very difficult and sensitive balancing act, because with the government now, post-apartheid era, they weren't responsible for sending the victims to the gallows. This is just more a retribution kind of process. So government must be commended to say, look, we wanted to bring the circle, the process to fruition, full circle, if I can use that. It would be a different story if the perpetrators, if I can use that for lack of a better word, those who actually sentenced the old apartheid state machinery, if those people then could come and answer to the families and stand to be accused, if I can use that word, So for government side, I think it is a very important process. It's difficult nonetheless, but it's a step in the right direction.
Yeah,
all right.
It would be very nice to see people come and say, okay, we think this is, because if we've got so many unmarked graves, somebody must know where somebody is. So that would be very nice to see people actually coming in and saying, okay, this is such and such a person, but we wait and see.
Look, we can only hope that the prison actually has a record of who was buried and hanged on which date. Well, let's move on to our next topic now, where the debate about women representation in senior positions resurfaced this week when UN Women entity forged hands with media organizations in order to promote gender parity. The Commission's chairperson, Phumzile Mlambo Kancuka, shares her thoughts on this issue.
We are concerned about the levels and the extent to which women are represented and are therefore able to be influential. We are concerned about the stories about women and therefore how women are projected. We are concerned about the media as an enabler that could convey the stories that we all want to convey. I am particularly concerned about how the media could help us to deconstruct the stereotypes about women.
Look, the focus of this was mainly for women in media. Sorry, Tumaelo. But Mahlaku, we've got an almost female management on our news team. We can brag about that. But are we really getting the same respect, opportunities, as well as support as females in this industry?
It's very hard to be a female in this industry, and I think that's the truth that we don't speak about, because it's a very demanding industry. It's a very taxing industry. Socially, you literally don't have any sort of movement. The type of hours that we spend here, and in society, you also have your responsibilities that are expected of you as a woman. In there, you must try and juggle this. So are we getting the respect? I think we do get the respect. But there are times where you feel you must really work twice as hard to be recognized, to be given that respect. But also, I must actually say this as well. In the company that we work for, it's a little bit easier. I've spoken to other people on the field. Things are much better here, and we see also the SABC is trying very hard to ensure that the playing grounds are leveled and things are much better. I mean, we've seen with the recent appointments, things they're making their way to achieving that equality.
What has your experience been?
Well, my experience has been very positive. I mean, going out to stories.
You love working with women.
Oh, yes. It's a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful thing, So it's certainly easier on the eye. And it's been great. The level of professionalism and it's just, there's no difference at all. So I think it is very progressive in terms of, with the SABC trying to make sure that in terms of gender parity, it is leading from the front, which has been my experience really. I mean, right across the scale, from management out in the field with camera operators, out with video editors, you know.
So you think the opportunities that are there are actually quite fair?
I think they're quite fair, but I don't think it's an industry norm. I think it might just be an exception to the rule because, you know, even in my travels through Africa, reporting on conflicts, Eastern DRC, you know, in Egypt during the revolutions, is it an environment that's conducive? I think also a lot of organizations worry about the safety. We know in Egypt, for example, during the revolutions, journalists, women journalists were groped and attacked and sexually harassed.
I was going to talk about that.
You know, so I think management has got a very fine line to try and navigate it because they want to protect a person's safety, but at the same time they don't want to be seen to be blocking a person if someone has got ambitions to go out into conflicts reporting or to go out into big stories based on gender. So
Mahlaku, what do you think are still some of the challenges that we face as women, like issues of sexual harassment in the workplace?
Well, sexual harassment in the workplace, I don't really think it really gets talked about because it's very hard to prove that somebody's been harassing you sexually. Look, it's still there, and it also, the responsibility also does fall on women to come out and speak.
Yes.
You need to speak. I mean, if you're being harassed, how are we going to know? Then to come out one day and say, hey, I was once a victim. How? You were a victim? Why did you not tell us you were a victim? Because I know that I can only speak for the place that I work in, but I know that it's an open policy here. You are welcome to come in. If you have such issues, we are encouraged. But some things are not industry norms. In some industries, it's actually better to keep quiet because it's career limiting. But we're very fortunate in this type of environment that we work in where you're actually encouraged to come out and speak.
All right. Well, although there is still great work to be done in realizing the idea of gender parity, but great strides have been recorded. Here's a good story to tell on this regard.
Positions in the newsroom are currently held by women. Group executive of news, that's the top position in our newsroom, is a woman. The head of television news is a woman. The head of radio news is a woman. I'm showing off now. The foreign editor, my boss, is a woman. The acting political editor is a woman. The deputy political editor is a woman. The national radio bulletin editor is a woman. The deputy sports editor is a woman. Do you want me to continue? The executive producer of the flagship news program on SABC television is a woman. So women lead in our newsroom. And that's not something a lot of newsrooms can say today, and something we're very, very proud of.
I want to hear your comments first, Tumaelo.
Yes, I mean, put it out in black and white, and it's very, very true. And I think, you know, it's very important to also make the point that when you have women in leadership, things get done. I'm not you know, trying to cascade or suggest that male leadership is slacking or any far less, but I do think the whole issue with the question of can the performance be measured or differentiated, the simple answer is no. Competence is not exclusively based on sexuality. It's an issue of if you've got the right person for the right job, things will get done, whether it's man or woman. And the fact that we're still having this conversation in this day and age is actually quite worrying if you think of how far the world has progressed, how far society has progressed in terms of promoting and making sure that women have an equal standing in terms of leadership, in terms of positions of influence. The fact that we're still having a conversation where we can count and head count shows that we still do have a long way to go. I
was about to read a pledge there on the video wall, and there it is. It's about, of course, a pledge to women. All right, we'll get back to it just now. But in relation to that, there it is. It says, I pledge to help women and girls achieve their ambitions. Hashtag pledge for parity. I think we all need to join this, men and women. But on the sidelines of what you were saying, Tumaelo, in South Africa, we have much more rights as females than in other countries. But do we still, what do you think we still lack in terms of progressing forward when it comes specifically to women's rights in the workplace? Stephanie, you mentioned earlier on that family duties can cause a woman to be, or rather, can come in the way of a woman's work. I mean, such things, do you think that they are properly addressed, they are well catered for in the workplace? Do they allow you to have half hours at work because you have to go get your school kids from creche? Not every day, of course.
I think we still have a long way to go in terms of that. And unfortunately, when you do enter into a corporate environment or in a working environment, there are some sacrifices that you're just going to have to make. And I think now we're at a time in our lives where women are seeing that men have made sacrifices, hence the duties of the household have ordinarily fallen on women. Now, because we're also trying to come up into, the corporate environment or whatnot, it's then where we start to say, okay, who do they then fall on? Because they also need to be done equally. So how do they get addressed? Well, I'm not really sure how they're going to get addressed. Maybe we need to see more house husbands. That would be exciting to see more
house husbands.
More house husbands. Well, yeah, it would be interesting. I mean, in our society, on the African continent, it's certainly not the norm. I mean, let's be honest. But we are seeing this conversation, and it's very interesting because I was at a pop crew conference just a few weeks back where this topic of gender parity was high up on the agenda, and the point that was made there by women and some of the delegates was that women in positions of leadership shouldn't believe they're there and to add numbers. They should participate and they should take their male counterparts head on. And I like the analogy that was made, was the fact that at some of these conferences and some of these leadership meetings, some of the women still feel it's their duty to bring water if there needs to be water at the table, or to make tea if there needs to be tea. No, I think everyone needs to play their part. So, I mean, I'm going to be crucified by a lot of male colleagues out there, but it is true. When it comes to the issue of gender parity,
speak for us.
We need to really give more than lip service, pay more than lip service.
Somebody once said, I was reading an article and said, how is this woman going to close important deals when she's not drinking alcohol and actually smoking a cigar? More topical issues of the week shortly after this break.
Yeah, good question.
We know that there will be huge numbers of people traveling. Already there's more than 1,000 vehicles leaving Gauteng to various to the coast and to the north. And we are maintaining high traffic police visibility, because we know that with high visibility people start to behave, and that results in fewer road crashes. So we are maintaining visibility. We are saying every 30 kilometers there will be traffic officers patrolling the roads. We want to make sure that we monitor moving violations, those people who are overtaking on barrier lines, people talking on their cell phones, and all of those kinds of things, that we are able to bring those under control. And we believe that if we are there, we are visible the entire journey, we will be able to bring the situation under control.
Media Monitor, welcome back. Now, we wouldn't be doing justice as women ourselves if we didn't mention this issue, and we were discussing it during the ad break, the issue of women pulling each other down in the workplace. Your very quick comment there.
I think, women sometimes tend to forget, being a woman, having heard other women, having seen such things, you have a responsibility. I think Michelle Obama spoke about it, when you've reached the top of your ladder, to pull your other sisters back up there. Being a boss or whatever it is that you are does not mean now you have an opportunity to take out your little petty issues, whatever that they may be. But pull her down syndrome is a lot of it's a big thing that a lot of women complain about. Hence, women sometimes complain that we find it very difficult to work with other women. They would rather have men, because sometimes women are seen to be emotional on certain things. It's a strength as well as a weakness, and it can be read as a pull her down syndrome. We don't really know how to best describe it, but it is a thing that women have a problem with.
All right, that's where we leave it on the women. Let's quickly now move on, where President Jacob Zuma co-chaired the official launch of the United Nations High-Level Commission on Health, Employment and Economic Growth in France this week. The Commission's key tasks include measures that will contribute to global economic growth, and President Zuma highlighted the global challenge of health worker shortage. More on this clip.
How could we employ more people through the health sector, given its size and its importance generally, and the manner in which also it relates and impacts to many other sectors, as one way of tackling the unemployment kind of question. The feeling is that if we have a commission that could focus on it, we could in fact employ a lot of people.
Look, Ban Ki-moon has to be commended for, his initiative, but now he's set the heavy task on President Francois Hollande as well as President Zuma. What do you think about this initiative? Let's start with you, Tumaelo.
Well, I think it is a very important initiative, because a lot of our government's budget does go to health. We saw a couple of, earlier this year, late last year, Minister Mohlaoli also announcing a big health plan that's going to come in, just basically to bring people in. We have a very powerful private medical aid scheme, that's medical aid scheme sector, that's basically making sure that those who are covered have the best access, and then those who aren't have to make do with what they can. The state has really tried its best to ensure, but with the national health insurance, it will try to level the playing field. So it is a big issue. And I think in Southern Africa, we're still dealing with the scourges of chronic illnesses. You've got HIV/AIDS, you've got TB, and this is one of the things that I think will always be at the forefront when you're talking about moving the country, the continent forward, because health plays a big part. If you've got a healthy population and you've got a strong population, you can plan accordingly, because you can work on things like life expectancy, and it's key to any government's planning.
Mahlaku.
Yeah, no, I must concur with Tumaelo on this. Health is such an important thing in any state across the world. And I think our country is one of those countries that the health ministry has, I think, one of the biggest budgets goes to them. Yeah. And if we can try and work around our health system and our health issues, I think we'll see quite a big improvement as well. Because, like he says, a healthy population, a strong population, it also translates into a more productive economy as well.
But then what do you make of the international trade when it comes to training? We're sending our students to Cuba and vice versa. Are we not then going to lose them forever when they decide to stay in Cuba, for example?
Well, I mean, with the programs that are currently running, the idea is that once someone gets the experience, in Cuba, for example, then they come over this way. And it works both ways because you've got a lot of Cuban doctors. I know at Chris Hani Baragwanath, you know, they do their service as well. So it's an exchange program, and the idea is to spread skills. Skills transfer. So the risk is always there. Look, someone will go and get an opportunity, develop themselves. But I think linked to that particular deal is the fact that you have to come back and give back for a certain amount of time. You can't hold someone back if they've got ambitions. But once they're back and they do give back, they will also impart what they've learned to others. So it's a knock-on ripple effect that government's kind of looking to work towards.
Look, the World Health Organization estimates that by 2030 there will be a shortfall of 18 million healthcare workers in the middle to low income nations. And we're already complaining about one nurse or one doctor per clinic in South Africa already. So do you think initiatives like this are really going to try and address that, Mahlaku?
We can only hope that they try and address that. I do know that one of the problems that healthcare workers do complain about is proper remuneration.
Yes.
It's a very competitive industry. And South African healthcare workers are among the best in the world. They have the biggest exposure to things, so they're quite
well-informed.
They're quite well-informed, and they're in demand as well. So we hope it will help, because I know the South African government does have that problem where their healthcare workers are being poached because they're so good, and which is in turn a problem. So we hope we won't find ourselves in that situation. But I think if we can pay our guys very well, and we can be, we're definitely not going to be paying them in pounds. But if we can try be competitive with the first world, I think we can retain our people, because people do want to stay at home. You want to go to Soweto and never Shisanyama. You can't find that in the US. So let's hope government is working on something there as well.
Mahlaku bringing it home, and I'm going to bring it home even once more. I mean, speaking of keeping our very own that are very brilliant, Professor Salim Abdul Karim, who just got recognized for her HIV research. I mean, that projects like that need more funding, definitely.
Yeah, projects like that do need more funding, and in terms of, again, it speaks to the developmental agenda. You know, we've got Vision 2063 with the African Union, and that depends on a vibrant, healthy population, because, you know, there's going to be plans to roll out infrastructure, plans to educate the African populace. And if you've got the breaks that you get when you've got health issues, that can affect your human resource management quite drastically, and you won't achieve the deadlines, you won't meet the deadlines, you won't achieve the goals that you set out. And for Africa, that's really, really important, and health is at the core of that.
Here's another milestone, still with health issues. Our Health Minister, Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi, has been awarded the prestigious USA TB International Award for championing the fight against tuberculosis TB. He was recognized for championing bold initiatives in screening, treatment, as well as the prevention of TB. He received the award in Washington, D.C. during the USAID award ceremony, which coincided with the World TB Day this week. Let's commend him. Let's start with you, Mahlaku.
I love our minister. I think he's one of the most passionate, that's the correct English word, ministers that we have, and you can see when he talks about this, he's full of knowledge, is quite great. He's passionate about this.
He even makes examples of himself. He says, I went to this and got a PP, you know?
Yeah. And I think that's one of the better choices that we have made, literally, as a country, is appointing that man into his position. Dr. Motsoaledi he's wonderful. He's phenomenal. He knows his stuff. He knows what he's talking about. He certainly deserves this award. I couldn't have given it to anybody else. And we have seen his programs bearing fruit. The usage of condoms has gone up. He's tried to spunk it up. We've got flavored condoms now. The Implanon, it's so many things that this man has come up with that are actually bearing fruits. I think he's well researched, him and his team. We need to commend him and the team. I mean, it's not a one-man show.
Absolutely, and I think the passion came through at that briefing about the national health insurance. And, just looking at the way he was speaking, and this is a man who is really passionate about making sure that the entire country gets the best quality care that can possibly be afforded by government. He was decrying the fact that, even as minister, when he looks at his bill, he was making a personal example, again, bringing it back home. Recently he had a medical bill, and he was just wondering, how can ordinary people afford to get decent quality care, because he had to go to a private hospital when he as a minister bulks at what he had to pay. So, with the NHI, you get the sense of someone who's thinking of, the bigger picture. What about the guy next door who doesn't have the benefit of private medical aid? So I think it's well earned, and big ups to the minister.
All right. Well, look, in relation to that, I mean, TB and HIV in South Africa, are we moving forward? And in terms of health journalism, is it still advancing in actually promoting health in South Africa, Mahlaku?
Well, I think health journalism, we play such an important role, and health journalism is one of the big things that we see. I mean, if you listen to the radio, for example, if you have to tune into your Thobela FM or your Ukhozi and stuff like that, you actually get to see what a big role this plays. Giving out people the necessary information, because I've noticed people are a bit lazy to read pamphlets and stuff like that. But once they hear it on the radio or see it, it actually becomes easier. People understand. You've been walking around with this pamphlet for a month. Then you hear it, suddenly the pamphlet makes sense. So I think health journalism is a very important part of things. Yeah,
it is. And I think, health journalists should be commended for, flying the flag high, so to speak. It's not necessarily an easy beat. And a couple of years ago, I remember when, the story of how South Africa is trying to deal with the impact of HIV/AIDS pandemic, for instance. There was this coined phrase where they called it fatigue, something like HIV/AIDS fatigue, where you get a sense that people were being bombarded with information so much, these tend to block it out. But health journalists then have to make the beat relevant and make people interested. So big up to them.
That's why there's free flavored condoms now. More Media Monitor returns after this. Do stay with us.
We have had various awareness programs, public education programs, and law enforcement operations, but we believe that the onus is now on the individual motorist, the individual road user. Obey the rules of the road.
It's February 2016 and the fees have not fallen.
Some other students are struggling, they don't have money to even pay the rent outside. They're struggling with food and they don't have a place to stay.
I have lost hope in NSFAS. I'm now applying for jobs at funeral parlors to watch dead bodies to finish my studies.
The race to replace Uganda's President Yoweri Museveni after 30 years in power is coming to an end.
Voting him out and letting him hand over power peacefully to another president would be the biggest sign of Uganda's democratic maturity.
Tumaelo, Mohlaoli and Mahlaku. Komane, our very own SABC reporters recapping stories that kept us talking this Easter Sunday. Talk to us on Twitter at SA Media Monitor. Now, Zimbabwean opposition parties say President Robert Mugabe's endorsement of a directive to shut down companies that did not comply with the indigenization legislation by the end of the month is a slap in the face for the International Monetary Fund. The government is demanding that foreign companies give majority shares to black people. We now cross to our correspondent in Zimbabwe, Shingai Nyoka, for the latest in Zimbabwe. Shingai, a very good morning to you. Look, last month already Mugabe has been threatening the closure of the non-compliant companies. What is the latest now?
Well, I can imagine that many of the companies that haven't complied are scrambling this Easter to try to submit acceptable indigenization plans. What the government has said, though, is that come April the 1st, these companies will still have an opportunity to show just cause to their respective line ministers as to why they haven't complied. And so we might see over the next couple of weeks some of these companies getting some kind of relief from their line ministers. But I must say, Alicia, that this was not the first time that there's been such a directive. Previously, with the indigenization minister's predecessor, Xavier Kasukwere, he'd written letters to banks, for example, threatening to shut them down if they haven't complied, and many of these banks are still there. So really, I think a lot of people are waiting to see whether this time around the government will make good on its threats to shut those companies down.
But what has been the general reaction, Shingai, from those affected companies? Any willingness to fully comply?
Well, there's a lot of alarm. This is unexpected. There had been indications earlier this year when President Mugabe had said that companies that don't comply in 2016 will have to close down, but no one really expected it to happen so soon. What we understand is that we have companies, for example, that are still defiant, that don't want to submit their proposals. And so really what might happen is that these companies will just vote to shut down. Zimbabwe is in a very dire economic situation at the moment, and many of these companies are struggling to stay afloat. And so feeding a 51% shareholding at this time might not all go well for some of the balance sheets of these companies. And so really there's a lot of despondency, there's a lot of alarm, and there's a lot of panic. But ultimately the Zimbabwean government might get a few companies, especially some of the banks, submitting proposals.
Shingai, thank you so much for that update. That is our correspondent in Harare, Zimbabwe, Shingai Nyoka, on an update on the indigenization program by President Mugabe. Now, very quickly, Belgian police have arrested 7 people in raids in the investigation into Islamic State suicide bombings in Brussels. Islamic State suicide bombers hit Brussels airport and a metro train station on Tuesday, killing at least 31 people and wounding more than 200 rather. Now, yesterday's reports were saying that 3 men arrested and were charged with the deaths and terrorist activities. One of them, very amazingly, is a freelance journalist. Very quick comment, because we don't have any more time. Mahlaku, why are you smiling?
Yeah, it's a dangerous job.
Yeah,
well, he's suspected to be one of the bombers.
That's outrageous. Outrageous because, well, I mean, you wouldn't want someone associated with journalism, which is supposed to be, giving a platform and voice to the voiceless and the oppressed, and then someone comes and is linked with something so gruesome. I mean, a suicide bombing or a terror attack is one of the worst infringements on human rights that you could possibly, do anyway. So I was taken aback by that, actually. But it just goes to show you about this whole network of international terror, that no one is safe anyway, really. And, governments now really have their work cut out for them because they're fighting a faceless, borderless enemy.
All right, let's quickly take your tweets now because we're really out of time. I think we've overrun so much on this show. Let's start with, who's that? I can't see the name, but he says, when you achieve gender parity by dispensing positions to the politically connected, Does it solve problems? That's a big question there. Bonkosi Boy says women would do better in leadership positions if they would be given a chance. That's the call we've been resonating throughout the show. And Tumaelo agreed with us. And Tamis Kozana says a skilled shortage is because of ignorance of our government. So some of the big companies, they don't care. All right. And that is, of course, where we wrap today's program. Thank you so much to the two of you. Enjoy the rest of your Easter Sunday. And that is how we end the Easter Sunday edition of Media Monitor. It's been a pleasure having you with us. You can now go to church, but remember, we are back next week Sunday for another captivating show. I'll be back later this evening with primetime news. Until then, enjoy your Sunday. I'm Alicia Jali. This is SABC News.